Welcome to Rooted and Ready from Annie's Project, a podcast sharing real conversations about risk, resilience, and the decisions shaping life in agriculture. I'm your host, Karisha Devlin. I'm a farmer and a training and curriculum officer with Annie's Project, and I'm really glad you're here. Today, I want to share why this podcast exists and why these conversations matter. The strongest operations and the strongest leaders are both rooted and ready, rooted in values, stewardship, experience, and community, but ready to adapt, ask questions, take informed risk, and learn something new. Being rooted doesn't mean staying stuck, and being ready doesn't mean abandoning your foundation. Agriculture requires both, and many women are already living that balance, even if they don't always name it that way. This podcast will talk a lot about risk. Risk is built into agriculture. There's market risk, production risk, financial risk, legal risk, human resource risk. Every decision you make on your agriculture operation is related to an area of risk. But there's also emotional risk. The risk of speaking up in a business conversation, saying I need more information, trying a new enterprise, transitioning land, making a change that others don't fully understand. Through my work with Annie's Project, I've seen what happens when women are given space to learn, to ask questions, and work through risk management decisions in a supportive environment. Confidence grows. Not loud confidence, not showy confidence, steady confidence. The kind that says, I understand my numbers. I can evaluate risk. I can participate fully in decisions. That steady confidence changes agriculture operations. And the confidence that we see women stepping into when they're having those financial conversations are making those farm and ranch management decisions, that was built on intentional work. So before we look forward, I want to honor the roots where this work began. Annie's Project didn't appear overnight. It started with someone noticing that women in agriculture needed more understanding, more confidence, and more space to ask questions. And the woman who saw that clearly is joining me now. Ruth Hambleton is the founder of Annie's Project, and her vision created learning spaces that have impacted women across the country. Ruth, welcome. It's an honor to have you here to share the origin story behind Annie's Project. And just to start us off, Ruth, what first made you realize that there was a need for something like Annie's Project?
My background is an extension. I've been working, probably the first 25 years of my extension career, where I thought women could join extension programs, but yet whenever I held those programs, I noticed women weren't showing up. Secondly, I noticed women would come to my office, just privately, to hold conversations with me that I knew they would not have held with anyone else. But because I was a woman, they felt that they could come to me. And then the third thing that goes behind the Annie's Project here is just observing my mother and all her everyday life that she went through on her farm. She was a town girl who married a farmer. No background necessarily, but just a desire to be on the family farm, to have a family farm. And so I would say that combination of observing my mother, my extension career, and just women reacting to me is what formed the foundation for Annie's Project. That whole combination became the muse for me to sit back and put together the program that was kind of designed for women like my mother.
So you've answered this a little bit, but maybe you can dive into it some more. So when you did first began and you had your very first Annie's Project course, what were women in agriculture telling you that they needed, or what was some of the feedback that you started getting from that?
The first class, that's a pretty interesting group of women. I'm going to call them the pioneers. in Annie's project. And what they were needing in that group was social network.
Mm.
They so many of the women lived close to each other, but they met each other for the first time in the Annie's Project class. And to this day, they're still friends with these women. And, as a group, I still have lunch with them. So I think it was that social networking that really rang true with them. The second thing that rang true with them was our method of teaching. It was hands-on questions as they arose,
Mhm.
and they liked that. It was just, we didn't relegate them to 400 PowerPoints and then questions later. We put 2 or 3 PowerPoints up, and then they raise their hands, or necessarily didn't even raise their hands. They would just start asking questions. And before I knew it, they were taking that course where they wanted it to go, where they wanted that information. So I was impressed with them as a group like that. Number one, they need social networking. Number two, they were not afraid to ask their questions, but we had to put them in the environment where that question could be answered most efficiently.
Mhm. So building on that first class, and that first class was held in March 2003, correct?
February of
February
2003.
2003.
Yep.
So here we are 23 years later, and Annie's project has evolved and changed a lot since that initial class. Did you imagine what it would grow into today?
I did not. I was of the mind that this was a grant for 1 year. And just like any extension program I ever did, you would deliver on it, write the report, and then move on to something else. That is probably the route it would have taken had I not run into Bob Wells. He was a farm management specialist, or whatever his title is there in Iowa. And he said, I think we can do something with this. I think this program has legs.
Mm.
And that's where the idea that maybe this program could be scaled to go to other states
Mhm.
and to last beyond the year that it was delivered.
What was some of your biggest challenges in those early days?
The doubters. Um, I think, Karisha, you were in the room when we first talked about, Bob Wells and I first talked about expanding the program to Iowa and Missouri.
I was.
And if you'll recall, Tim Eggers was in the room, and he says women will never sign up for a 6-week course. That came out of Tim Eggers, who later, by the way, became one of the most fiercest and best supporters of Annie's
He
project.
was, yes.
He but we were in that brainstorming session, and he was putting in his opinion of
Mm-hmm.
a 6-week course. And I believe my answer back to him was, women will invest in a 6 weeks course that they feel is of value to them. And so I had to defend it. And
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't just defend it there in that room with you and Tim Eggers, Bob Wells. Mary Soba was in the room
Mm-hmm.
there. A gal who I can't remember her name right now. She was extension.
Yeah.
So the doubters was one of the challenges that I had with the program, convincing them that what we were doing was going to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing was the material that we were presenting. Having an extension background, I wanted it to be research based. I didn't want to be an advocate. I didn't want to be a testimonial.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to deliver that solid research based information that you can build a foundation on. And there was people who at the very beginning would try to come into the program and advocate. And this is another place where Tim Eggers was so valuable to us. He up front, if somebody started advocating for a position someplace, he would stop them and say, we do not advocate, we educate.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that we had to I don't say fight to maintain, but it was in our DNA to maintain it. And so
Mm-hmm.
whenever we felt that challenge come to us, we defended it. We said, we don't advocate, we educate. And so I'd say in the very beginning, that probably was my two biggest challenges, the doubters and those who would come in and try to take the program over for another purpose besides what the program was designed for.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So we've talked about the beginning. We may have some listeners that are very brand new to Annie's project. Maybe this podcast is the first that they've heard of it. And as we're talking about challenges and involvement, can you talk us through after that initial meeting to where Annie's project is today? Kind of maybe take us through that timeline because you faced other challenges when you decided to turn Annie's project into a 501c3.
We did. Bob Wells being from Iowa State University, they had a very strong hand in disseminating the program throughout the nation. And when we decided that we were going to become a nonprofit charitable organization, Iowa had some very, very strong opinions as to how they wanted to be involved and how they wanted to control, being on the board and just all kinds of stipulations. That was our first big challenge, I'm going to say, in our timeline, was breaking away from those that helped us launch. And we still wanted to keep them. We didn't want to hurt feelings. But I think, Karisha, you were there when we had some pretty
Yeah.
strong worded fights. And in fact, I think it was you who described it. I feel like I'm watching my parents divorce. Those were your words.
It was some awkward and difficult conversations that had to be held. But in the end, much like divorce happens because of a reason, right? In most cases, there's some relational structural issues there. And sometimes it's better for all parties involved to have that break and to move on. And I feel like that was the case for Annie's project. We had outgrown where we were. And for Annie's project to continue to evolve, to move on, to reach more women or more people, that had to happen.
It did. And I think that's just a life lesson. Just anything that's going to exist over a period of time, whether it's marriage or a business agreement, it's going to change over time.
Right.
And I kind of think sometimes we were a little bit like a band. We had a lead singer and we had, all the support group behind us. And we had our groupies who were following us. And we were changing that. We were going to change who the lead singer was. We were going to change what kind of songs we were going to sing. And that was kind of upsetting to some people. But again, like you said, you've got to look forward. And what allows an organization to grow is an understanding that things are going to change. They are not going to remain static. And then in that timeline, when we went from an extension program into with other partners, with Farm Credit is one of our big partners, working with local soil and water conservation district, NRCS. There's any number of organizations that we've started working with that can deliver. So those who were purist on delivering extension programs didn't like the idea that we were letting other people deliver on our program. Again, that ownership feeling. So that was sort of in that timeline as well, trying to keep the vision in mind while making all these kind of messy changes in behind the scenes. And then when we went to being an official charity, that gave us a means for fundraising. We were now, you could take a tax exemption if you were to contribute to our program. And so I think where we are right now is we've got all this new media, this new ability to deliver, all these groups that are delivering on us. I think the challenge that's in front of us is keeping the mission pure, avoiding mission creep. And I think Tim Eggers said it when he said, when you make a copy of a program and you copy a copy and you copy that copy, down the road, you sort of lose the sharp image of the picture that you started with.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a good way of putting it. But I think because he put that bug in my ear, that we've been able to make these changes. We've been able to along our timeline, introduce virtual programming, which in the beginning was an absolute, oh my goodness, that's a no-no, because the social component was so critical. But then we learned that, well, more women busy, this is how they learn.
Mm-hmm.
They click the button on the computer and they join a group of women who are from all over the country, and they're good with it. I mean, that becomes their social networking.
Mm-hmm.
So allowing for those kinds of changes to occur, I think has been good for us. And of course, then the big push that took us over the edge was the pandemic years, where just, my goodness, everything shut down. Universities shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Government agencies, restricted their access to them. It was a pretty dark time in the Annie's Project delivery mode.
Mm-hmm.
How do we take this curriculum and modify it? And that's when the rise of virtual programming, retreat style, where we're together for a couple of days and taking an 18-hour course, putting it into a couple of days. How could we do that? So we had a lot of adapting to do, but I think we held on to that general mission of Annie's Project, where we have a social network, there's interaction, there's learning that takes place, and then women contributing to that learning as
Mm-hmm.
well.
I would be in agreement with that. And I think with Annie's project, throughout the years, we have done a great job. And I say we because I've been involved with Annie's project for a long time and been on the board of directors and then been involved, employed
Leadership.
by
Mm-hmm.
leadership, employed by Annie's project. But I think one of the things that I mentioned this earlier in the podcast when we talk about risk and mitigating risk, I think we've done a good job of that too as an organization, just kind of uh, making sure that we're looking at the landscape ahead. And even with those years of the pandemic, everybody struggled a little bit there, that we saw an opportunity to evolve and an opportunity to do things different. And we keep adding building blocks, keep adding different curriculums, different programs, different way to meet the needs of individuals in agriculture. So I think that's been really important for us.
And the other involvement in that timeline was the recognition that not everything has to be delivered in an 18-hour
Mm-hmm.
block.
Right.
And so Annie's Inspired
Mm-hmm.
became a way for us to measure the ripple effect. You throw a pebble in the pond, and it's not just the pebble hitting the pond, it's that wave that goes out and starts a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So we built strong on that as well. And that gave people freedom to offer single topic, single subjects
Mm-hmm.
for any variety. Just that's one of the strengths of our program is we've granted ability to our facilitators to adapt this program, keep the pillars in mind, that social networking, that education, that contribution. Um, if those components exist in a 2-hour program, I'm good with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's been one of the strengths of the program, and it's kind of one of the weird, I don't want to say downfalls. It's one of the weird kinks of our program is people expect that we have a curriculum that comes in a 3-ring binder notebook, and you check this off and you check this off and you check this off and you have an Annie's project. No, no, we really depend on that local group to massage and pick their topics and find their presenters and still put the Annie's Project logo on it, that I think now we're getting a bit of a nationwide reputation where people hear our name and they know what we're about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been 23 years building, and I'm hoping we got another 20 years of building ahead of us on that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think there is importance in being able to modify just educational materials for your particular location and your needs and what type of agriculture that you're involved. That's really always been very important to us. And we're going to kind of transition here to talk about risk in a little bit more detail and get your thoughts there, Ruth. But before we do, could we do just a shout out for all of our listeners? Where can they find more information about Annie's project?
Probably the best place to get a hold of us is through our website, anniesproject.org, or you can just Google Annie's Project or word search Annie's Project, and we'll be pretty far to the top of the list. That click on those links, and that should take you to our webpage where we have all our contact information. Mm-hmm. And you can drop us emails. We also have our social media, Facebook. But I guess if you're serious about getting the information and us getting back to you a little bit quicker, probably that website is going to be our best bet.
Oh. So, as we talk about risk, and we've talked about the different types of risk, I mentioned those earlier. For our listeners, what is the difference in your mind between avoiding risk and managing risk?
Avoiding risk is so boring. I always use the example, if you want to avoid crop failure, don't farm. It's just you're avoiding it. Mm-hmm. And life is not meant to be avoided. Mm-hmm. Life is meant to manage. And if you look at the history of American agriculture, my goodness, the stuff we have managed our way through is absolutely incredible. So if you don't get anything out of what we teach you in the class, it's that there's always a future in agriculture. I'm one of the big believers in that. Agriculture is one of the few industries on this earth where you take nothing and make a valuable product that consumers want and that can provide you living. It varies on the spectrum. I mean, we do have those farms that overextend and go bankrupt. We have those farms that aren't quite big enough to support a family. So you've got spouses going off farm to supplement the income. You've got additional businesses that you tack onto the farm. But that is what an American farm is about. It's land ownership and your ability to control those resources. And I want women to have that knowledge that we are going to control these resources. We're going to manage the risks. And there's a future in agriculture for me as a woman.
What's one mindset shift that changes how women approach farm or ranch or their growing operation business decisions? If you could pinpoint that, what would be that shift?
Probably confidence. Women who start with Annie's Project, they're not a blank slate. They have lots of experiences, but they don't know how to move forward with that experience. Mm-hmm. And just being in that room, getting the knowledge, meeting with women who are going through it now and have that experience of how do you talk to farm service agency, or how do you talk to the feed salesman who comes in. I think that level of confidence is what I've observed over the years. And when you're confident in what you are conducting in your business, people detect that and they respect that. So confidence is the thing that I would say most strikes me that women coming out of Annie's Project have mastered in this risk field.
I 100% agree with you. If you could give one piece of advice to a woman stepping into more responsibility on her farm, ranch, or growing operation, what would it be?
Be fearless. Be absolutely fearless. I'm not saying be reckless,
Mm-hmm.
but be fearless. Any mistake that we make, you can correct. It's not the end of the world if you make a mistake. In fact, that's how we all started riding a bike, right? You
Mm-hmm.
got on the thing, you scraped your knees up a couple of times. The next thing you know, the rest of your life, you're riding a bike. Same thing with women who are maybe starting out in farming.
Mm-hmm.
Just be fearless. Just have that vision, have those daily goals in mind, and just know that if it's in your head, go for it.
I think that's great advice, Ruth. And you're so right. Sometimes indecision paralyzes us, I think, to where we're afraid to move forward or afraid to try something new, try a new enterprise, or we're afraid to make a marketing decision because what if the price goes up? And we should have waited. So all of that, yeah, all of that fear, all of that worry, it just it stops you from that momentum.
And don't be afraid of the mistake because, Karisha, you said it, especially in the marketing
Mm-hmm.
field. Um, Men and women are very different marketers. Men like to swing for the fence, hit the high, and then just, I don't want to say brag about it, but that's in their DNA to be competitors. Women, on the other hand, we look around the kitchen and we go, I want a new countertop. I have a different reason why I'm marketing grain. I'm marketing grain for a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
for the house, to pay the feed bill, to, fix a roof. We just have a different mentality about why we're marketing. And so if you market and the market moves up, women are also great about beating themselves up. Stop that. Just absolutely stop that. I wish I could remember the name of a gal who she ran a marketing group in central Illinois. And she was the one who taught me that, all right, so you made a $36,000 mistake and you could have bought a new pickup truck with it. Tomorrow's another day. Just go for it. And I just absolutely love that woman because it made me feel better.
Right.
Just you're just accept the fact you're going to screw up. And when you do, don't beat yourself up about it. Just move forward with the next day. Get up and
Yeah.
have a cup of coffee and enjoy life.
A great answer. I love that, Ruth. So, last question. When you look at the future of women in agriculture, what gives you hope?
Oh, I am so big on agriculture. And I'm just going to put it out there whether you're a man or a woman, if you have land assets or agriculture assets at your control, your future is bright because A, people always need food, and B, they always need fiber,
Mm-hmm.
clothing. It just, and we supply that. We're part of that. So if I'm looking down the road, whether you're male or female, agriculture is just the business to be in. I
Mm-hmm.
just, I'm so thankful that God put me on this earth on a farm. We were poor. We were one of those farms that wasn't big enough. And, dad eventually had to go off and get himself a job, but I'm just so grateful to be in this position today where I married a guy who come from a farm and we both decided that we wanted to raise our kids on a farm or in a
Mm-hmm.
farm environment.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had chores for them. The daughter helped pull baby pigs. They helped us with wrestling a calf down to give it its vaccinations and
Mm-hmm.
this sort of thing. So just yeah, agriculture is in my DNA. I think it's in everybody's DNA, but there's a privileged population that gets to exercise on it. So if you're one of those that's in that 2% of the population providing the food for America and beyond, count yourself as lucky and just give thanks every day.
Well, Ruth, thank you. Not just for this conversation, but for the foundation that you've built. Because of Annie's Project, women across the country are reading financial statements with confidence. They're participating in succession planning. They're asking questions about risk. And they're leading. And this podcast is an extension of that work. So looking forward, we want to help farmers, ranchers, and growers to be rooted in knowledge and ready for what's ahead. Although Annie's Project is women-centric in our approach of our methodology, this podcast is for anyone who is actively farming, ranching, growing, who's entering agriculture, who's managing land, who's navigating transitions, who's participating in financial decisions, or if they're trying to build something sustainable. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. You just have to care about making thoughtful decisions. Some things that you can expect in upcoming episodes: you'll hear conversations with women navigating transitions, discussions about production practices, honest talk about financial risk, working with your family, overcoming obstacles, succession stories, and lessons learned through experience. Some episodes will lean educational, some will feel reflective, but all of them will center on this: you are not navigating agriculture alone. Thank you for being here at the beginning of Rooted and Ready. If this resonated, share it with others in agriculture who might need it. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's ahead. And until next time, stay rooted in what matters and ready for what's next.